the presentation.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Tony. I'm just gonna, if I kind of halt a moment, it's just because I'm keeping my eye on the waiting room as well. But I'm ready to go when you are, Tony.
Hold on. Of course. Oh, hold on. Apparently now my.
Great. Thanks, Tony. So as always, when we always do our land acknowledgement, McMaster University recognizes and acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and the Haudenosaunee nations and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. So just a quick overview of the Vanier. It's a tri-agency program that is designed to attract and retain world-class doctoral students to Canadian universities. The value is $50,000 per year for up to 3 years. And the duration and start is up to 3 years, depending on how many months of doctoral studies have been completed. And the start date can be May 2024, September 2024, or January 2025. Stage 1 is a letter of intent package that is due on Wednesday, September 6th of this September. It's due at 10 a.m. The agency quotas for the 24-25 competition, there are 11 applicants that can be put forward for CIHR, 8 for NSERC, and 5 for SSHRC. Indigenous applicants, institutions may recommend applications from self-identified Indigenous applicants to the Vanier CGS competition above and beyond their institutional quotas. So we just kind of give a quick overview of the quotas and the results over the last 5 years. So for CIHR, we've had either 10 or 11 for the last 5 years. And we had a pretty low year once, but everywhere they seem to be around 4 or 5 per year. NSERC, 7 or 8 are our quota, and we receive anywhere between 1 and 3 a year for NSERC. And SSHRC, we have 4 or 5 that we can submit, and we typically receive 1 or 2 a year. Applicant does not have to be registered or admitted to a graduate program at the time of application. There's a 2-stage internal process here at McMaster. Students must have received departmental endorsement to be able to submit a stage 1 Vanier letter of intent package here at McMaster. And if students are endorsed to stage 2 of the internal competition, they will have to submit a full application through ResearchNet. Canadian citizens, permanent residents of Canada, and international students are eligible to apply for Vanier. The first class average in each of the last 2 years of full-time studies, so for this year's competition, 21 and 22, and 22 and 23, or the equivalent. So first class average for Vanier at McMaster is a 10, which is an A- or an 80%. And be seeking financial support to pursue your first doctoral degree or a combined master's PhD or MD PhD program. You cannot have previously held or currently hold a tri-agency doctoral award. And you must be nominated by only one Canadian university, which must have received a Vanier SGS allocation, or sorry, Vanier CGS allocation. You must intend to pursue in the summer semester, May 24, or the academic year following the announcements of the results. So September 24 or January 25. Full-time doctoral studies and research at the nominating university. You must have completed no more than 20 months of doctoral studies as of May 1st, 2024. And that started a full-time doctoral studies no earlier than September of 2022. Have completed no more than 32 months of full-time study in your doctoral program by May 1st of 2024, if you've accelerated directly from a bachelor's to a PhD. It's no time spent in a master's program at all. Or have completed no more than 32 months of full-time study by May 1st, 2024, if accelerated from a master's degree into a doctoral program without obtaining your master's degree. And the months of study completed are calculated from the original master's enrollment date.
Okay, thank you, Diane. I just want to reiterate, I'm going to go on to another slide, but first, we've had some issues with students applying who transferred from a master's to a doctoral program, not realizing the rule of the 32 months. So the months of study do not get calculated from the first month of your doctoral studies. It gets calculated from your first months of your master, when you began your master's, if you transfer to PhD. If you obtained your master's, it starts from the first month of your PhD. So just for anyone who transferred and didn't obtain their master's, please make a note of that. So just wanted to go over the transcripts. All transcripts are required. So that includes undergraduate and graduate. If these transcripts include credits earned at college or CEGEP that have been transferred to a university degree for credit, include the college and CEGEP transcript only if the grade earned does not appear on the university transcript. So some university transcripts show transferred and doesn't show the grade. If that's the case, you'll need to include the college transcripts. If it includes the grade on the university transcript, you don't need to include your college transcript or CEGEP transcript. You also need to include a legend of each transcript. Usually there's a legend on the back page of one of the pages, or I think a lot of the digital copies, they include the legend when they send you the PDF. So the transcript text must be horizontal and uploaded in order from least recent to most recent. This is new. This is the second year they're doing this, but for international transcripts, they require a 250-word summary to describe the variations in the grading system from the country of the transcript and the Canadian level equivalents, and or explain international credentials and equivalencies as required. The summary should be a PDF document attached at the beginning of the transcripts. If you need help on this, your graduate administrator should be able to assist with that. Equity, diversity, and inclusion. The Vanier Canada Graduate Scholarship Program strives to promote equity, diversity, and inclusion through the application, review, and selection processes. To better equip all those participating in the Vanier competition, that includes applicants, the institutions, the referees, and the reviewers, the tri-agencies have curated an important list of resources to help guide each group. So the EDI page on the Vanier CGS website provides guidelines and resources geared towards all these groups of people. The topics that the EDI page focuses on is promoting equity, diversity, and inclusion in research respectfully involving and engaging Indigenous communities, and reducing unconscious bias. So promoting equity, diversity, inclusion in research, they refer to sex and gender-based analysis plus, SGBA plus. In order to ensure the research Vanier funds is impactful and relevant to the diversity of the population, they now require applicants to systematically examine how differences in identity factors such as sex, gender, race, ethnicity, religion, age, and mental or physical disability affect the outcomes of research and the impacts of research findings. Applicants are now encouraged to take SGBA plus principles into account in their proposed research. There is more information about this on their website. We just wanted to provide some brief information about that. With regards to research respectfully involving and engaging Indigenous communities, research involving and respectfully involving and engaging Indigenous communities is defined as research in any field or discipline that is conducted by, grounded in, or engages with First Nations, Inuit, Métis, and or urban Indigenous communities, societies, and or individuals, and their wisdom, cultures, experiences, and or knowledge systems as expressed in their dynamic forms, past and present. In your proposed research respectfully involving Indigenous communities, please include this research and respectfully involves and engages Indigenous communities at the beginning of your lay abstract. For nominations in which the proposed research respectfully involves and engages Indigenous communities, applicants and nominating institutions should be aware and refer to relevant principles and protocols established for this type of research. They do include more information about the protocols, so you can go to their website for more information. And the third one is reducing unconscious bias. There's a training module on unconscious bias in the evaluation process, but it's still useful for the applicants to help them identify and mitigate their own unconscious bias. So now I'd like to introduce our faculty presenters, Dr. Carter and Dr. Verdu. Dr. Carter is the Assistant Dean of the Nursing Graduate Program, and Dr. Verdu is a professor in medicine, also the Associate Director of the Farncombe Institute. Dr. Carter and Dr. Verdu will be speaking. We also have Vanier scholars who may speak at the end or during the presentation. And we have Alexandra Nychuk, who won a CIHR this year, and Nicole Diakite, who won a SSHRC Vanier this year. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thanks so much, Tony. And I'm going to start sharing my screen. Okay. Diane, thumbs up for seeing my screen. Thank you very much. So thank you everyone for joining us again. Ellen and I are both faculty members who participate on Vanier review committees, and Alexandra and Nicole have kindly joined us to share their words of wisdom and tips and challenges. And I'm going to welcome Elena and Alexandra and Nicole to jump in at any time that they have questions. I want to thank Tony and Diane for getting this presentation together. So the Vanier, of course, is weighted equally for on three components: academic excellence, research potential, and leadership. And that's what's different for the Vanier than the other tri-agency doctoral awards, is this really heavy component on leadership and leadership potential. As Tony mentioned, first class average for the last 2 completed years. Reviewers will look at all your post-secondary grades. They look at awards and distinctions that you're going to put in your CCV. And academic excellence should be integrated into your referees assessments. We're going to talk more about referee assessments. They're very important, and they should address your academic excellence that will also correspond with what they see in your CCV and in your transcripts. So your research potential is about includes your proposal and how it's going to contribute to the advancement of knowledge in your field, the potential benefit to Canadians and society, and any anticipated outcomes. Research potential is also assessed by evidence such as journal articles, conference papers, and abstracts. And again, this should be explicit in your referee assessments. They should speak to this directly. Now, in some fields, research excellent output is almost exclusively reliant on published first author papers, but that's not for all fields you're in. And the committee does assess the candidate's contribution to research and interest in discovery. Leadership, both potential and demonstrated ability, is demonstrated by indicators such as personal achievement, involvement in academic life, volunteerism or community outreach, civic engagement, goal achievement, self-management, integrity, and social skills. Leadership can take many forms, of course, but you really have to be careful and to outline not just your accomplishments, but how they involve leveraging your leadership skills to achieve your goals. And the selection committee doesn't simply consider your participation in sports or arts or volunteering or employment, for instance, but it really has to be crisp and clear about how you demonstrated leadership in those activities. Okay.
Can I add something there?
Yes.
Yeah. So hi, everyone. So this is key, what was said in the last bullet point. what you need to demonstrate is not only your involvement, you need to show somehow that you are driving some of these leadership activities. So that's key.
Yep, absolutely. So the difference between leadership and volunteering is based on the role you had in an extracurricular activity, for instance. So leadership may be developing a strategic goal for yourself to benefit the larger community, perhaps delegating to others, whereas volunteering tends to be you're doing tasks that have been given to you by others. So if you lead the task, that's leadership. So it's really going above and beyond what might be expected.
Mm.
Okay. And again, this section is where use the leadership section of your application to position yourself in extracurricular events that demonstrate leadership. Okay. So here's some examples. Perhaps you've been a participant and a leader in a scientific organization. Okay. Perhaps you've, led a conference of students, or you've organized a conference of students, being on university committees. Perhaps you've written a position paper or a clinical practice guideline. You've been invited to do some talks, some KT work, maybe doing community outreach with students, with public health, etc. Awards and scholarships are examples of your leadership. Again, this volunteerism, if you actually led something as a volunteer. So perhaps we've had students in the past who have organized a run or a sports event. They led that. Perhaps that might be something. Okay. Perhaps newsletter contributions, patents. Okay. Here are different examples of leadership. Okay.
I think Alexandra has, sorry to interrupt, her hand.
Sorry.
Up.
Oh, sorry. Alexandra, please share.
Oh yeah, if I may, another thing is really important with like this leadership statement for me was really challenging to write, if I'm being really honest. But it's really important that it tells a story as well. So don't just think of it as an extension of your CCV. Really make sure you're putting these experiences together to tell your story and why you deserve to win the award. And make sure that your whole application, I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit,
Yes.
tells a story as well. Like it's like, you don't want there to just be a collection of like things, sometimes maybe in like your job application, you really want it to tell your story. And how do these things fit together? Why are you doing this research? All of those different things. And why are you a leader? And so making sure, like I said, it's not just a list of all of these things. Like if maybe you can tick off all of these things that we're going through as examples, but make sure that you're putting them together. So you're saying, like, for example, in mine, I was telling this story that I'm like a bridger between I'm Indigenous, I'm Michif, and my research is in Indigenous research. So I see myself as a bridge between academics or the Western world and the Indigenous world, for example. So think about those kinds of like maybe metaphors and things like that as well.
Fantastic. And Nicole, did you want to share thoughts about this?
I would probably echo the same thing. I was really strategic in terms of like how I was explaining my leadership experiences and how it's benefited kind of myself as well as the community. So I thought that was really important.
Mm-hmm. And I can give an example of a past Vanier scholar from a graduate nursing program. Her research was about elderly living in the community and supporting mental health of the elderly in the community. And one of her leadership activities was related to elderly folks in the community. And she was able to tie that together. It's as both the students have mentioned, it is strategic, and you're really putting it all together to promote yourself as a future researcher, a future scholar in your field, and how these things all come together. Thank you both. Diane, did you have a question?
No, I just
my
wanted to
phone?
add, there was a question that popped up. Somebody was just looking for a clarification of what KT stands for that I believe was on the previous slide.
Yeah, KT is knowledge translation or knowledge dissemination. So how have you put your work out there and sharing it with different either communities or organizations or people? So knowledge dissemination or knowledge translation is the KT work. So what are your outputs and how are you sharing them with the people? Typically, real KT is that the people who can use the results of research get them. So, we often think a journal article is usually seen by academics, but if you do work with elderly in the community, do community organizations get that work? Do they understand your results? Can they look at those? So that's what about KT. Here's some more examples of leadership. And under teaching, being a TA is not a typical leadership activity. That's what typically we expect from graduate students, but perhaps you were involved in developing programming or curriculum development or development of courses, okay? And, supervisory activity can be, and mentorship can be an example of leadership. Okay. So putting together the whole, and we're going to have more details about that, putting together the whole thing for your application, your research proposal, your personal leadership statement, which I think Alexandra and Nicole would agree is the tough part. We'll talk more about it. Your CCV, a special circumstances part of the application is optional. You'll have 2 referee assessments, and those are academic referees, and 2 leadership reference letters. We'll talk more about those. And the thing to remember too is that the Vanier committee, the people who review your applications at both the university level at McMaster and at the national level, if your application goes forward, come from a variety of disciplines. Sitting on the committee is myself from nursing and Elena from her background, and someone from humanities and someone from social science and someone from engineering and business. So you need to write in a way that is understandable, meaningful, and impactful for people who might not be in your field. Okay, again, reviewers are mostly a non-specialist audience. Really try to avoid non-technical terms, avoid jargon. There's a perfect example, right? I always say the term KT all the time, and a lot of people wouldn't even know what that is. So really be careful about checking for jargon. Some people will put graphs and images in your research proposal, but you have a very small amount of time. So make sure if you're doing that, they're easy to understand, has to be clearly written, concise, a well understood a hypothesis or research problem or statement. Use your full 2 pages and headings. But again, it has to, reviewers read multiple proposals. There should be some white space, should be judicious use of headings and space so that, it's easy for the reviewers to read. Okay. So leadership statement, again, the tough part. It's hard for us to all write about our own leadership, but it's a clear statement of what your personal experiences are that have shaped your doctoral research. Should go beyond a list of your accomplishments. And that's what the student said quite clearly. You put some thought into this, you need to be strategic. And you have to outline to the committee ways in which these accomplishments demonstrate your leadership abilities and skills. Okay, there are tips for the leadership statement. Read the Vanier website carefully. Use your 2 full pages. Use strong action words and use the same words in your CCV. Okay, be succinct, concise, and avoid an autobiographical approach. So as much as we want, the committees want to learn more about you, your leadership, understand the whole package of your academic excellence, the research you're going to do in your leadership. When we talk about this autobiographical approach, sometimes students will start their leadership on a, ever since I was a young child, I've wanted to do this. And through grade school, I participated in these things, and in high school I did this, and then in university I did. So you really want to avoid that kind of storytelling about, that kind of autobiography approach. Instead, start really impactful, the important things you've been doing. Okay. Highlighting the activities, your future leader in your field. Like how, if you've led a conference, if you've organized a group of students, if you've had outreach to a community, to talk about, science or what you're doing, talk about how does that link to your future research, your future role as a researcher. Be deliberate in describing these activities. Link your goals and your research program. Okay. How does the leadership things you're doing link to your research? Go ahead, Elna.
Yeah, so I think what you are saying is exactly the way I felt in these 2 years that I reviewed these leadership statements. So those that start with what problem or what gap or what inequity you as a leader are addressing with your activities, rather than ever since example. So if you can start with that impactful, this is a problem in the world, and I'm doing all this through my research, and that's where I want to get as a leader. I think those are the best sections I have read.
Right. And again, it has to link to your research. Link it to your researcher and your future potential as a researcher in, mental health I'm using that example for elderly in the community. How does what you're doing link to that? Exactly. You might want to see how other researchers tell their story. Again, this leadership statement, clear writing, formatting, spacing, paragraphs, headings. So it's easy, easy on the eye for the reviewers. Describe what you're doing, what you've done beyond your research and coursework. So a lot of students fall into the trap of writing, again, more about their research and what they're doing in the lab, what they're doing, collecting data in their personal statement. That's not what it's about. They have to link, but this is not about, what you're doing in research. Okay. So the objective of this leadership statement, we're spending a lot of time on this because this is the tough part, how you started on your way to become a future leader and that you have potential. Okay. You can tell a compelling story that links to your accomplishments and your future goals, but not that, this is my life. And ever since I was little, I've wanted to do this. Okay. So a good way to start, and, there is a process. If you make it, if you get to that first round, there is a process where you'll have some mentorship to really sharpen these things up. So when I work with students for their leadership statement, who sometimes are a bit lost, write a list of your leadership activities. Just start now. Okay, I was the, I was the vice president of the Science Student Association in second year. I did this, I did it. So kind of start listing all those things. I led that community outreach program. I'm the vice president of the National Biology Student Association. Whatever you're doing, just start making a list and then start figuring out what are the top 3 things I've done. You don't have to list them in order like so many years ago. Pick those top impactful ones and consider about how are they related to your research and your potential as an academic researcher. So I'm going to ask Nicole and Alexander maybe to jump in. And do you want to share kind of some of those activities you think that, that you shared in your leadership statement and how they, how you think they may have tied to your research? Nicole, are you okay to share a bit?
Sure. My leadership statement was a little bit more linear just because every experience kind of built on another experience. So I live and I work in Nunavut, and I spoke about working in child protection for many years and how that changed the way I view social supports and things like that. And I moved on to another organization where I'm actually an executive director of an advocacy organization for people with disabilities. But that was not enough, I think, in the leadership statement alone. I needed to speak about how my experiences as an executive director kind of created these leadership opportunities for me. So I spoke about creating programming that is now utilized territory-wide. I spoke about how I've increased core funding for the organization from, to over millions of dollars for the organization, and how that's impacted the community, how it's impacted me as an individual, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's kind of what I did.
And Nicole, that shows, those are those are skills you need as a future academic researcher, right? Looking for funding, working with other agencies, and you talked about, you've increased the funding. You show that what's the outcome of the things you're doing. So that's a great example. Alexandra, do you want to share some of your leadership activities and how you made it work in your application?
Yeah, certainly. So I kind of had 4 main paragraphs, I guess I would say. And so the first one spoke to kind of my impact in education, meaning kind of the mentor of the students that perhaps are in coming up behind me in education, framing that as kind of mentorship and I guess future supervisor kind of roles. Thinking about for me, it was getting other Indigenous students into graduate school. I've helped many students, so that was really impactful. And then talking about research within my community. So not the research that I'm doing for my current project, but more so just other things that were research activities that existed in my community. And maybe they didn't always come under the guise of research. So for example, when I worked at My Nation, I created a survey. And so with 32 community participants, so I mentioned things like that, those types of activities working within my community. And then for me, mine is about inflammatory bowel disease. And so I spoke about my connection as a caretaker to my grandma and my brother and my auntie who all have that condition. So I spoke about my connection to that disease and my experience being a caretaker within the healthcare system. And then finally, ethical considerations, because that's really important in Indigenous research, is the ethical component. So speaking to, sitting on the Human Research Ethics Board at my previous institution, all of those different things. I will also say I applied 3 times. So this is not something I learned in one application and I just tied this all together. I applied before I even got in at MAC. I applied my first year and I was only successful my second year. So I will say that as well.
Thanks, Alexandra. Elena, do you want to share anything about tips for the leadership statement?
No, I think most of it has been said.
Okay. So it has to be, it needs to be as compelling as your research proposal. And, we say modesty is not a virtue here. You need to sell yourself, sell the work that you've done, talk about how, in Nicole's case, I've got the experience being an executive director. I've increased funding. Here's the impact I've made, in Alexandra's example, these are the things I've done related to my research program. I have experience with, caretaking, I've done these different things. Okay. Talk about the significance in terms of leadership and sphere of influence and discuss their impact and importance of your career objectives. Okay. So perhaps you've created a blog or a vlog about something, you can talk about, what the impact, dollar figure impact. Perhaps you've led a student society and you've increased the membership. Perhaps you've got an outreach program and you've gone out to 4 to 6 different communities and had so many presentations about different things. Okay. Perhaps you've led a group, a student group, and you can talk about different things. Okay. So you can, impact and what's the result of the leadership activities you've done. Okay. Again, depending, it can be a linear journey. Often you want to put strong things up first, and then add minor roles if necessary. Again, I'm repeating myself a bit here. Talk about your proof of change, the role you played Don't just list them. Indicate the change that's occurred since you've assumed any leadership positions before and after. Now, some people, some of you may be here thinking you're not going to apply this year and are thinking of applying in the coming years. You know, Alexandra has described how she applied 3 times. So, and maybe some of you are feeling discouraged. We've all been there in that sometimes it's really difficult just to keep your head above the water when it comes to studies, etc. So if you're not applying this year, there may be opportunities for you to get more involved and take on some leadership roles if you're applying a year from now. If you don't really, you could either talk to your supervisor about this, perhaps talk to someone in the program and see, sometimes students will approach me in my assistant dean role and say, and I'm looking for some leadership opportunities. Is there anything I could be part of, or just some ideas? So, if you're not applying this year and just here for information, that's something you might want to consider. Okay. Never expect that the reviewer is going to understand the extent of your accomplishments. So stress the value of your work, give them insights on why it was important, what you've done. Talk about how you've gone above and beyond the expected norms. Again, you might list the fact that you're the more senior person in the lab and you had to orient new students, but that would be expected. Talk about how you went above and beyond doing certain things. Be honest, upfront, and authentic. Okay, we've got lots of tips about this leadership statement. And again, you'll get the slides in a couple of weeks. You'll be able to see them, but it's because this is the tough part for people. Again, using the numbers to back up your claims. I've already started. Use strong action words. State what the end impact was. Avoid any unrelated fluff. This idea that, don't be too focused on biographical elements on why they wanted to become a researcher. And that's the example of, when I was 8, I fell out of a tree and broke my arm. And ever since then, I've wanted to be in healthcare, et cetera. So just be careful about focusing too much on that and show impactful things you're doing now related to research. And
Nancy,
go
there is
ahead.
just a question on that. There's a participant asking how a medical condition, if this should be brought up in the leadership statement. And so it's exactly that. To whoever asked that question, if you are mentioning this, it's not for the reviewers to say, oh, terrible, what happened to you. It's about how that experience or medical condition has made you, stand up, put everything together and organize something that has benefited others having that condition. So if you put it in that context and you end up with that positive and active element of leadership, then it's okay. But if you are just going to say that you suffered from a chronic condition or your grandmother died of this or that, it's usually not enough for the above and beyond.
Diane?
Thanks. Since we're asking questions from the leadership statement, somebody else had asked, how far in the past are our experiences relevant for the application? Undergraduate studies, or just the last 2 years, or all of post-secondary studies?
I think go ahead, Elena. Go ahead.
No, I think all experiences in your life are important if they connect to an activity that then you demonstrate you raised above and beyond and you helped others with similar experiences.
Great. Okay. Some tips for your Common CV. Your Common CV is that list of all your activities, awards, and accomplishments that the reviewers will refer to as well. It's evidence of your excellence in all categories, and make sure you're taking full advantage of your CCV. Again, under leadership, action words clearly indicate how you perhaps conceived, if you were part of an event or goal, how you got there and how you got others to implement it. Give examples, so not just say I led. So just, I led the student conference on this particular topic, give some examples of what you did, you know, exactly what you did to lead it. Okay. For in your CCV, make sure journals and articles are up to date. Okay. Include all your awards and distinctions under academic excellence. You may want to state the impact factor of the journal if you want recognition. And committee members might not understand impact factor of a journal in their different disciplines. So you may want to put that if that's part of it. Okay. And people ask about how many publications do I need to know, and it really depends. I think the reviewers understand from different disciplines and programs the difference between impact factors. So maybe you have a few papers with very high impact factors. Maybe you have several papers with lesser impact. CHR insert candidates may have an average of 2 to 5 journal articles, with a fair number as first author and competitive presentations. So you put those presentations in, talk about, you know, those perhaps international conferences, etc. But again, the reviewers understand that in programs and disciplines where you may be applying to SHRC, for instance, you may not have the same number of journal articles. It may be book chapters, conference presentations. Okay, so it's really dependent on the norm in the field, and that's the kind of discussion that happens at the Vanier committee, where there's representation at McMaster from all the different disciplines. And I don't know if Elena or the students want to.
I do have a comment on CV because it has come during discussion. So there is some confusion. I don't know if there will be a slide on this, but some confusion of where to put awards versus fellowships or scholarships. So sometimes scholarships and fellowships are put under funding. And it's more important if you have a national funding, let's say MITAX or Ontario Graduate Scholarship, that you put that under awards, because that's very, very important for the reviewers to grade you academically. Don't put them, even if it comes with your stipend money, it is not to be put under funding.
Okay.
Funding is just if you have co-written a CHR grant or an NSF grant. Okay, so make that difference and please place your, because then there's, oh no scholarships, no awards for this individual. And then when you go to the CV, oh no, but they placed it in the wrong place. But sometimes that discussion doesn't happen and it may be missed.
Great tip. Thank you. So there is a part of the application where you can have is it a statement, Diane and Tony, a special circumstances statement, and Elena's saying yes. And you can identify any circumstances that may have delayed or interrupted your academic career or your advancement. And it is a statement that you attach to your nomination. And you're also encouraged to explain any circumstances, including when gender, race, diversity, abilities, sexuality, health disparities, educational access may have impacted your academic trajectory as well, in order to allow for a fair assessment of your research achievement.
And if I can comment here, so this special circumstances was the previous EDI statement, I think, in previous applications. It's very important that when you explain all those circumstances in your life and there was a question on this, it is not just your ethnicity, your culture, medical conditions. It can be socioeconomic issues that delayed you. It can be being a single mom or having to work at the same time that you studied. But it's, again, don't make it just biographical. Say how these circumstances in your life have made you a better citizen and that you are now giving back through some action that improves these EDI components in others. Okay, so if you can go to that action base in your statement, this is very well seen.
Okay, thank you. So you're going to have 2 referee assessments, and these are typically people who you work with in research or in academia. Typically, it's a supervisor and someone else. And you need to get this information and contact your referees well in advance. So it's July 12th, I think, and this is due September 4th. So if you're serious about applying this year, you very quickly or soon need to contact people who are going to be your referees. Okay. And you're responsible for supplying your referee with documents necessary for them to write the respective letters. Okay. And there is a referee reference document in the Vanier package that was emailed at the end of June to departments. And students should forward this document to the referees. And it has pertinent information required for writing a reference. Thank you. As well as a link to the equity, diversity, and inclusion page, which must be reviewed by the referee prior to writing the reference letter. And the referee should make sure every trait of the applicant being described has meaningful evidence provided. And applicants are encouraged to consider the full range of potential referees, including experts who could provide the best relevant evidence, perspectives, and insight to support the review of your applicants in light of the selection criteria, excellence, research potential, and leadership. And there is a major scholarship support letter guide on the Vanier information site, and you should probably download that and send that presentation to your referees. So I'm going to ask Elna and Alexander and Nicole if they have anything to talk about how they, about this academic referees that they chose, or any tips on that.
Yeah, I would add, if you are selecting, if you are an international student or you had international experience and you have one referee that is international, that you please explain them how important it is to follow these criteria for the letter, because the way people write reference letters in Europe is very different from the way we do it here. And then you have a lukewarm assessment, and it's a shame.
Okay.
So train the referees if you're going to get someone that is international.
Okay, great. Alexander, do you want to talk about how you decided who your referees would be? Do you remember?
Sure. I think for these ones, there was less choice, I would say, than the leadership ones.
Okay.
I picked both of my my master supervisor, and then my current supervisor, my PhD supervisor. But I think speaking to what Elena was saying, making sure, thinking about how, do they have other students who have gotten Tri-Council? These letters have to be way over the top. We're not talking about oh, they're a great student and whatever. They're it's way over the top. And so thinking about people who can speak to you in that light, or who are willing to speak to you in that light. And I think providing them excruciating details. So for me, I went through McMaster's strategic plans and all of that kind of stuff, and how did my research fit in, and provide those kinds of linkages to really, well, these referees specifically, making sure that I had those linkages.
Great. Nicole, do you want to share how you chose your academic referees? Do you remember?
Yes, yeah, I am the exact same. I had my master's supervisor and then my current supervisor. And I did something very similar where I looked at my experience. For example, in my master's program, I looked at my experience and all the positives, and especially the positive comments from my supervisor, and, reminded them of those experiences, reminded them of the work that I did, resent my thesis paper.
Great.
And all of that, so that they were able to really speak to, my experiences, and provide a reference that was really tailored specifically to me.
Fantastic. And yes, it's over. I like to Alexander said, this is an over the top letter. They have to, your referees, both leadership and academic referees, have to sell you and show you that you are one of the, had so much potential. This is all the things you've done. Send them information to remind them. Send your master's, maybe it's been a while. Send your master's supervisor, if that's who you're using, or someone else, what you've been doing since. This is a reminder of my thesis. Don't forget, I published that paper and I presented at these conferences, and remember I did this. So give them lots of information. That's why, you have to give them lots of lead time to do this. Of course, we're not saying you should write these reference letters for them, but giving them lots of information that you'd like them to emphasize, and giving that information is such a great idea to help them write fantastic letters. And those links, okay? So there's, give them the link, or send them that PowerPoint presentation. This is how you write a good letter. For some people, they do it all the time, but it may be new for some referees, I'm not sure. Okay. And then your leadership references. So you need 2 leadership reference letters, and they should ideally be written by someone who's in a non-academic capacity, but it may be someone in an academic capacity that can speak to your personal trajectory and reflect the leadership evaluation criteria. Okay. Now that's underlined. Does that mean it's hyperlinked maybe, Diane? And yes, it is. Okay. You may want to share your leadership statement with them. Okay. Ask them to respond to the following: your life and research trajectory, an assessment of your demonstrated and potential leadership ability, and check your application for spelling, grammar, and formatting. The referee should elaborate on how you have gone above and beyond the opportunities presented in order to achieve a goal, contribute to your community, or how you have taken on responsibilities for other. And Alexandra and Nicole, I'm going to put you on the spot again, and maybe you can talk about how you chose your leadership references. Nicole, do you want to go first?
Sure. I chose to go with a colleague of mine, as well as the president of our organization, who is also an elder, a community elder. And they were able to speak about knowing me prior to working with me in my current organization, and everything that I've done for the community, but also going above and beyond in my current role. For example, things like staying late to complete tasks, applying for funding, so on and so forth. What else was there? I also made sure that they were able to speak. I chose people who could speak to everything that I spoke about in my leadership statement, so that there was a direct link and there was evidence of what I was saying. So that was really, really important. And then, of course, a colleague was able to speak to my character and my leadership qualities, and just how I provide support and all of those kind of things. But again, directly linking to some of the things that I had listed in my leadership statement.
Okay. Alexandra?
Yeah, for sure. And so I would just like to also extend that these are letters you will actually see, unlike your other letters. So you will actually get to see what they write about you because you're the one submitting it. So making sure that your leadership statement doesn't overlap, like you want to see the linkages, but not so it's super repetitive, because space is going to be super important when you write your applications. So thinking about like, do I need to go into as much detail in my leadership statement if the letter says this? Those kinds of things. I think choosing people was really hard. I think I switched every time I applied who I had asked. And so who I had asked this time was Dr. Marcia Anderson, who is the head of NSCI, which is the National Consortium on Indigenous Medical Education. So she sits as the chair for one of the organization I work for. And then also I lead the Indigenous Advisory Council at STEM Fellowship. So I had the youth COO write me a letter as well. So thinking about those things in the past, I had, I was not successful when I had people from my community write letters, for example, or lab supervisors. So just, it's really hard and it changes every year. And so like, that's my advice is to just apply. And, even if you don't have all the things right now, it's just a really good process to like learn how it works and stuff like that.
Right. Thank you. Nicole?
Yeah, sorry. The last thing too is just I think it's really helpful if people request reference letters from a few people, and then you can choose which one best suits your application. I saw that in a presentation around when I was applying, and I thought that was a super helpful tip.
So that's just for the leadership reference though, I think, because Tony and Diane, let me know for the actual academic referee, that's not them submitting a letter. Do they get a link to fill in? How does that work? You're muted, Diane.
I was just gonna say, Alexandra is nodding her head and shaking, so I think she might actually be more apt
Oh, okay.
to answer that quickly, so.
Alexandra?
Yeah, so your referees, they will get a link to fill out. But your leadership references are the ones you get to see. So there's two different things. They're even structured different. So those are all things to consider.
Yeah. Okay. So, and that's what you and Nicole, I think both of you said, I was able to see those leadership letters. And then, so I kind of adjusted my leadership statement, so you make it, so it's not too repetitive or that. Okay, great. Okay. All right. Your leadership letters should provide context for the committee that illuminates how your participation in activities, whatever your activities you're listing, goes above and beyond. We've said this a few times. It's above and beyond active participation. I mean, this is a very prestigious award. I think it's the biggest doctoral award in Canada. So it is that above and beyond excellence in leadership. And be aware that high achievement, while admirable, does not necessarily constitute leadership. Okay. Final tips. Seeking applications from other students, particularly if those who have been successful in some way. So there may be people within your program that are former winners that you might want to take a look at. Discuss your statement with your supervisor, your department chair, past winners or Vanier committee. So, get that statement together, have some other eyes on it, get some feedback on that. You need to expect this is, again, very prestigious and a great award. So just be ready to write it, review it, edit it, rewrite it. And it really gives you an opportunity to know yourself and continue to build on your strengths. So it is I think Alexandra mentioned, having been through it 3 times, it was probably obviously it was worthwhile if you did it 3 times, Alexandra, but so there's some examples of that. And I just want to thank everyone. And I'm not sure if Elena or Nicole or Alexandra want to share more at this time, share the challenges that you went through. I'm not sure. Nicole, do you have anything else you want to share?
I think one of the biggest things for me is I started really early. I started writing well into the summer, probably even in July. And I took a break from it. I came back to writing. I changed a lot of things. So it was a really long process just because of the editing. So I really encourage people to do that. And I also encourage people to read it out loud. You'll find a lot of errors, doing it that way. It flows better. You'll find it's just so much easier doing it that way. But yeah, it took me a few months, but I took big breaks in between just so I can come back, reread it, and make sure that it was very clear and concise.
Great. Alexandra, final tips or challenges?
I think for me, getting as many people as you can to read your application is really important. And don't only stick to your department, or I'm lucky I'm in a multidisciplinary department. But people who challenge your ideology or challenge your research, that's who I would encourage you to get yours read by, because they will see things in your research that may be assumed for you, but they'll ask you questions that maybe sometimes make you upset, but at the same time, challenge you to see it from other perspectives. Because as everyone here has explained that, these are really broad committees. So even within CIHR, health is very, very broad. And so thinking about those pieces. And also I encourage you, if you do go through the process, I think it's in stage 2, anybody correct me if I'm wrong, you are assigned a mentor. Like kind of push your mentor to help you. I think for me, I didn't have mentors who were really, I don't know, helpful in the first 2 times. So I really went out of my way to get them to help me the 3rd time, to see how I could improve it. Because sometimes, sometimes you get really detailed feedback, and multiple times I've gotten like very little feedback. And I'm a person who really likes feedback. And so, yeah, I think those are the main ones that I would say.
Okay. Elena, do you want to share as a reviewer?
Well, I think I will echo everything that has been said. This is not just a project. This is a very highly crafted application, and you need time, and you need people to read it and give you feedback, and you need to read it several times. So start early.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so again, we're July 13th. I think application's due in 6 weeks, probably. So now's the time to start if you're serious about this. My final advice would be, because I've, acted as a mentor and had a number of successful Vanier and within our program, is just that link, is always be linking it so it's cohesive, and to talk about how, think about your future as an academic researcher. How is what you're doing going to be important for your future role? This idea from Nicole that I help secure funding, and Alexandra's talking about I work within the community, and she's on a national board. I mean, those are the kind of things you're going to be doing in your future as an academic researcher. You're going to be working with other disciplines. You're going to be seeking funding. You're going to reach out to governments. You're going to advocate. You're going to disseminate your work. You're going to have to be on media interviews. You're going to have to, join groups. So try to link what you're doing to your future as a leader in your field, a leading researcher in your field. So that would be one of my tips. So I'm assuming, I'm not sure, Tony and Diane, if there's questions we could be answering, or now there's probably more time for Q&A or questions.
Yes, Nancy, actually I've answered a lot, but
Okay.
there's some that I've tagged that I want to read out loud, so I'm
Okay.
not sure. One says, hello, good morning. I'm starting a PhD in geography, and I have the following question. Can a professional experience of management or supervision of a team in a company be considered a leadership experience for an academic scholarship?
I would say, Elena, do you want to start?
No, just that's a good question. If this is a paid job, that's where people say, okay, this was a job, you were being paid for that, it was part of your job. That's where the question mark comes. If you can show that leadership role that you took went above and beyond your paycheck and what was expected from your work, then maybe yes, it fits. But be careful with things that were your job, that you were paid for.
That's a great example. So one example might be, if you're working in the lab and you helped orientate new students to the lab, that might be an expected thing. Above and beyond that might be that you organized an orientation session within your program, and some, work with other schools. I'm just making this up, and linked you to other schools so that you could have lunch and learn sessions. So if you're, let's say in your current example, so you're a manager within what you're working, that is a leadership position. But let's say in your role, you went above and beyond and created an outreach or a national organization, et cetera. So that might be the above and beyond.
Thank you. The next one is, have any applicants been successful without many research papers, but rather many conference presentations for CIHR?
I don't know if I could say if any have, but certainly, publications are important for CIHR.
Yeah, I would echo that. So it's it would have to be taken into consideration with the type of application you are putting. And if you make an explanation of why, presentations, are these presentations of abstracts that you submitted, or it's this some kind of knowledge translation that you initiated, a web or a blog, or and then maybe this could be taken into account versus publications. The issue is if your project is based on traditional science, then of course having some publication will be important. If your project is different and it's there are other ways that we now consider the DORA principles, but then your project should be about that. Is that clear?
We don't know who
Okay.
asked. it.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so if whoever, if that wasn't clear, then the person could just send another question in. So the next question I have, if the individual completing the referee assessment is directly involved in the leadership activities as well, is it okay for them to also write the leadership reference letter? And I had a similar question that I responded to. There was a chair who said they're a supervisor to someone, but a student did some leadership in the department while they were the chair of the, so they're the chair and the supervisor. My suggestion to that person was to ask the graduate chair to sign the leadership letter. That was my suggestion, but I'll throw that out to Dr. Verdu and Dr. Carter.
I don't think you should have, I don't know if it's allowed, but I don't think you should have one person write 2 letters.
I agree. That's why
Yeah.
I had suggested that the chair
Yeah.
ask the graduate chair. So if there's someone who has a similar position to you and can sign the letter, I would suggest that. Dr. Verdu, any
I
suggestions?
agree. I fully agree. And you can always find someone above that person that can do the writing. I
Yeah.
agree.
But you do want them to, you do want those people to know you, and whoever's writing those letters to know you and know what you're doing, as opposed, and it's great to have someone with a prestigious title to write a letter, but you want to make sure that they know you and have worked with you and can speak to you about you.
So it seems this question was not well, so the answer was not, so I do not have a graduate departmental administrator, please, I need more clarification. They don't
Okay.
understand the answer. So I can give you an example because this happened to someone I know. So the person who was requested, the letter that was being requested was from the director of a facility where this person had worked. There is always someone above the director of the facility, which can be the director of the institute. And so in that case, one letter was written by the director of the facility, the other one, the director of the institute. So I don't know, that's one example, but it was a way of solving a person that works in a hierarchical structure. You find 2 different people who know you that can write the different letters.
Thank you. So the next question I have, can other graduate students who mentored you in your undergraduate act as leadership references?
Alexandra, you are nodding. What do you think?
I think it depends on how well they know you and what
Yeah.
they're going to say about you and how long they've followed you on your trajectory.
Right.
Are all really important things. But if they can only speak to you, I would say like in a year, that's not that helpful.
Mhm.
You really want to have people who know you and can speak to and also think about, this sounds really corny, think about the legacy of the things you've done. So once you're gone somewhere, what has happened after based on your leadership that you were when you were doing it? I think that was really helpful because before earlier when I did other the previous applications, I was thinking of like, what was I doing right when I was the leader? But also think of like the legacy, that sounds so corny, the legacy that you've left, and how things have continued to evolve.
These leadership referees can be community members. They could be people in an organization. I think both Alexandra and Nicole have talked about that. Yeah. Other questions?
Thank you. For academic referees, 1 or 2 will be your current supervisor. One of 2 will be your current supervisor. Is that correct?
Likely should be.
Yes, because if you don't have a letter from your current supervisor, it can raise, some red flag.
Yeah,
And-
I was going to say
sorry.
the committees, we look carefully at these applications. We read the letters, we look at the transcripts, your proposal, everything. The committee it takes a lot of time to review these, so it has to all fit together. And I agree with Elna. If your current supervisor is missing, that would be a concern.
Thank you. So there's this question that I think Dr. Verdu addressed, but so someone said, I'm not sure I understand your answer. I do not have a graduate departmental administrator. Please, I need more clarification. This could be someone responding to what I said. We tell students they need to have departmental support in order to submit a Vanier application. So I had told this person to contact their department graduate administrator. Now, if you don't have one, you need to confirm what department you plan on applying to at McMaster before you can submit a Vanier application. So for example, if you want to apply to physics, like you have to have a department that supports your application. So let's say you want to apply for a PhD in physics for next year. You contact the physics department and the graduate administrator in that department, and they will tell you how the process is to submit a Vanier application through their department first, so they can confirm if they support your application.
Right.
So you can't just apply to the Vanier as a student without having departmental support or supervisor support.
Right.
I hope that
and sometimes there are quotas for different. So I'm in the Faculty of Health Sciences, and which is nursing, rehab, biomedical sciences, e-health, et cetera, et cetera. And we in FHS, we know we have quotas, and there's actually quotas for nursing within FHS. And so all I need to be aware as the assistant dean, I need to be aware of all the students who are applying. And again, this is that kind of, if you're thinking of applying, you talk to your supervisor, and then whoever your director is, your assistant dean, et cetera, and email to them, because they have great information. They can also help, maybe you want to engage them in helping to review your work. Not saying they have to be a referee or that, but anyone who's in nursing, we have a process. If you're applying for a Vanier, it comes through me as the assistant dean and someone else in research to, again, help with this application. So I think that's what when Tony is talking about administrator, I think that's what she's talking about.
Can you ask your current supervisor to give a reference, even if you haven't started your degree officially?
Oh, so in that case, it would be your previous one. Yeah. Yeah, that's tricky if you haven't supervised a student.
Well, that's tricky too, because you can apply, but you need a very research proposal is 1/3 of your application. So you need to be you need to be writing about, what's the background, the problem statement, what are your methods going to be, et cetera. If you're doing certain research, your hypothesis, that has, who's your population or what's your, et cetera. So if you haven't started yet, you may be at a disadvantage because you need a real crisp research proposal to go forward.
One way to go around that would be if you can demonstrate that you have had contact with your supervisor and you have been working on the future project, and the letter then reflects that. That would be one way, but I agree, if you are already starting the program, it gives you a slight advantage over not having started. Yeah.
And Alexandra talked about, she applied 3 times, and probably, Alexandra, I'm assuming application number 3, you really had your research proposal was well put together, well thought out, it had many revisions and that. Is that correct, Alexandra?
Yeah, and I applied like this. I applied when I was still in my master's. I was going into my second year. And I applied without really meeting, like I had a supervisor that I wanted to work with. And so it's definitely more challenging because people don't know who you are. And also a reminder, you do need a letter from your department chair as well. And so that also means that your supervisor will be also advocating on your behalf often to your department chair as well for those kinds of letters. I was lucky, my supervisor was really supportive. And like for me, it was really important to like learn the process because it's kind of there's lots of things going on. There's these aren't all the pieces part of your application either that we spoke about. There's more than this as well that needs to be prepared. So yeah, and by the end it was more refined, but there's definitely more challenges if you aren't in the department yet. But I don't know, if you have a supportive supervisor, I would try it just so you can get acclimated to the process.
Nicole, anything you want to share about that? Or
I have a very different experience. I was very lucky that I applied in my first year and I got the Vanier. So I didn't have any experience of having to go back and make edits or changes. I think what really helped me though is just this editing process. Obviously having people review it, utilizing free software like Grammarly or anything like that to help with edits. But yeah, I was very fortunate that I won Vanier in the first year.
Mm-hmm. So, and, in the bigger picture of your student life, we don't want you at all to be discouraged. Again, this is very prestigious. And, it's a big award, but I'm going to say that putting together these applications are skills that you are going to be using in your future as a researcher. That's what, you're going to be applying for funding, for scholarships. So this is great training for you, and you may not get it first year. And maybe if you're eligible, you can apply for another year. Alexandra was able to apply for 3 years, but great learning. And I'm assuming Alexandra, Nicole got it her first try, but Alexandra, you got some feedback on your first applications, did you? And was helpful moving forward?
Yeah, certainly. And I think especially with my project, there's not a lot of research and it's very contextual. And so I think there was a lot of challenges with my research proposal as well. And so, like you said, I was able to really refine it and make it tailored so that anybody reading it could really understand it. Because if I look back, I don't think I could say that for the first version, for example.
So Alexandra, you applied for Vanier in September. Did you also apply for CHR doctoral after that in October? Is that one of us? I only applied this past year, and that was I can't accept both, but right. You were awarded both. Yeah.
I was awarded both.
Yeah.
The first year I applied for both and I was unsuccessful for both. And then the second year I just applied for Vanier just because at that time I was entering coursework.
Right.
At McMaster. I had moved because I'm originally from what we now call Manitoba. And so there just wasn't enough time. And I would say that these are really as Nicole said, time consuming. So to have kind of drafts that you can show people, and even throughout the year, I knew that I wanted to apply again and show them to different people, I think is also important. And I will say that going into your PhD with kind of a research proposal was really beneficial, I would say as well. I would say that my experience in my department, I had a lot more refined already than a lot of my colleagues. So just going through the process, I think, was important. I was just lucky to be successful the third time.
We're not going to say it was lucky. We're going to say you earned it. Nicole, did you apply for SSHRC after you applied for Vanier?
Yes, I did, but was not successful for that one.
Okay, so so it happens different ways. So, you know, you've done all this work for your Vanier application if you're applying, and then you use that work because Tony and Diane probably can tell us what the deadline. I don't know if there's deadlines for the SSHRC, CHR, and NSERC, but that comes afterwards. So you can use, you know, some of the work you've done for afterwards.
And so just to say, because someone already asked this, they are different applications.
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah, but you have a foundation in particular for the research proposal. There's different documents required. And reference letters are different. They get new, if you're using the same people, they get new links. There are no leadership reference letters required for the doctoral application. But some people used to think by applying to the Vanier, you automatically apply to the doctoral, and that is not the case because they're two separate competitions and two separate applications.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing too, I was just going to say is that, you know, have a frank conversation with your supervisor and perhaps your department chair if you know them. So, so in our program, sometimes people who are early on and who can apply the year after have eligibility after this year. It may be a conversation about, because this is a lot of work. Am I better? You know, how does it look for me this year? Do I, you know, maybe you don't have any publications. Maybe you haven't done a lot of things. Your research proposal is not in good shape. Is it worth this year to apply for Vanier, or do I spend that, I'm going to say, a couple of months that it takes to put this together, perhaps writing a publication, perhaps doing something else? Speak to your department chair. The department chair might know we have 3 candidates who are very strong that we're going to put forward, and they may not put you forward. And this year, if you have eligibility in the coming years, this might be a year to be doing something else and getting prepared for even stronger application next year. I don't want to discourage anyone from applying, but those are honest conversations you might want to start now, with this 6 weeks away, with your supervisor and someone in your department about how would I look? Would I be competitive, do you think? You know, or should I spend this time perhaps preparing for next year? Might be a conversation you might want to have.
Nancy, I was just going to add to that. I think Alexandra had also said that, you know, she knew she was going to be applying again. Things change year to year, but they're usually fairly small. So the basis of that application remains the same year to year. We don't take those instructions down. They remain on our webpage until they're updated for the next year. So it's always available for you to go and look at and start working well in advance if you choose not to apply this year, or if you weren't successful and you're going to apply again the next year. Everything's there for you to get started and then just make changes once the official announcement comes out.
So you may be thinking next year is your year. So as Diane and Tony said, take a look at what the application looks like. Maybe, you know, I don't think they've made the announcements of this past year's current winners yet. Have they done that?
No.
Not officially.
No. So officially, then you may want to, you know, once that announcement comes, you might want to read Nicole and Alexandra and the other winners' bios. And maybe you want to reach out to them and have a chat with them and say, you know, you're in engineering. Can you talk about, you know, whatever, something like that? You know,
previous year's applicants, or winners, I should say, are all posted. So that's another thing. We've had a question or two pop up saying, you know, can we have access to successful applications? We can't give that, but they're publicly posted. So you can reach out to people as well.
Yep. Yeah. If you're applying next year, now's the time to see where are the gaps, you know. What do I, you know, where am I strong? You may have all kinds of leadership activities, but you don't have a lot of publications of that. And maybe you want to work this year on getting some publications, or maybe the opposite. You got all kinds of publications, but you really, you know, have you gone above and beyond? And maybe you have some time to see if there's something you can do to enhance your leadership statement and the work that you've done.
I think we have one more question that Dr. Verdu's responding to. Anyone else with any other questions? Just give it a minute, and if not, I think. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I think someone posted in the chat that this session will be uploaded to our website. The slides and the presentation that we just did. It will take a week or two because we have to send it to a company to get it transcripted and converted, but it will be uploaded to our website.
The slideshow we can probably get up sooner, just depends on how busy our communications person will be, but the video would follow a bit later, yeah.
Okay. So I'd like to, first of all, thank Dr. Carter for the many years of her doing this presentation and being so kind and helpful, and Dr. Verdu for bringing some fresh information to us, because your experience with Vanier the last couple of years has been so useful in our presentation today. So I really appreciate all the insightful information you provided, as well as Alexandra Nychuk and Nicole Dykite. Listen, having the winners here has so helpful for the other students, because you give awesome advice to the students, and honest, which is what we need. We need to be honest and open with the students so that they are aware of the application process and what's required. So thank you for coming and joining us, and thanks to all the students. Diane and I would be happy to answer any additional questions you have. If you email graduatescholarships@mcmaster.ca, we'll be happy to assist you in any way. And I'm not sure if anyone else has anything else to say. All good?
I just want to wish everyone luck in their applications, and as they go forward in their research and their contributions they're making. And of course, these are tough competitions, but you just, unfortunately, that's what doing research is about, is applying. And sometimes you don't get what you're hoping for, but, take the feedback you get and consider it, and it'll help you as you move forward.
All right.
Good
Thanks,
luck, everyone. Thank you all.
Have a great day and enjoy your summer, and good luck. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.